The fact that the superintendent followed the procedures to a letter is inspiring and shows, I think, good leadership that we've come to expect out of her.
The Police Association of New Orleans is reacting after Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick hit two people with her SUV over the weekend. Kirkpatrick has since apologized for the incident.
And as Mike McDaniel explains, the association says it's refreshing to see a police chief in a position of accountability and acceptance.
When news got around Saturday evening that New Orleans Police Chief Ann Kirkpatrick hit two people with her SUV, Eric Hessler was paying attention.
This accident was handled much like any other accident.
An attorney for the Police Association of New Orleans, Hessler says accidents involving officers naturally come with a higher level of scrutiny.
Police spend the majority of their careers, most of them, driving around in cars. So accidents are going to happen. They're not uncommon.
Hessler says what is uncommon compared to the past is how this crash was handled.
The administrative policies that are in place were followed, including drug and alcohol testing, which is standard for any other police officer. In the past, we haven't always seen that for certain rank of certain status.
Police say Kirkpatrick was on duty in her department-issued SUV when she hit two people on Iberville Street in the French Quarter. A woman was treated for minor injuries, a man was uninjured. Speaking exclusively to WWL Louisiana Monday, Kirkpatrick said she didn't see them.
If I had seen them, I probably we wouldn't have had the accident.
Police say Kirkpatrick's breathalyzer result was 0.00. Results of a urine test are still pending. Kirkpatrick said she had just visited an officer in the hospital before the crash happened.
I'm so sorry for what happened, and I'm so grateful that the two people involved really are going to be fine, and so just terribly sorry.
It's not like she blew through an intersection or anything else. It was simply an accident.
Hessler says Kirkpatrick's comments speak to promises of transparency and accountability she made when she took over as chief last fall.
Maybe it could have been avoidable, maybe not. But nevertheless, it doesn't change the fact that it was an automobile accident.
Watching it play out, Hessler believes the investigation will be done correctly and that any punishment will be fair. Mike McDaniel, WWL, Louisiana.
Once the NOPD completes its investigation, the case will be handed over to state police for review.
In New York, a beloved former civics teacher and football coach from the Midwest who served on the Veterans Affairs Committee while in Congress and won instant acclaim from AOC and Joe Manchin as the news broke this morning is Vice President Kamala Harris's pick to serve as her vice president. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz releasing this video as part of his introduction to the country. Watch.
Sometimes life is as much about the lessons you learn as the lessons you teach. When I grew up, community was a way of life. My high school class was 24 people. I was related to half of them. I learned to be generous towards my neighbors, compromise without compromising my values, and work for the common good. My dad was in the Army, and with his encouragement, I joined the Army National Guard when I was 17. I served for 24 years. I used my GI benefits to go to college and become a public school teacher. I coached football and taught social studies for 20 years. And I tried to teach my students what small-town Nebraska taught me: respect, compromise, service to country. And so when I went into government, that's what I carried with me. I worked with Republicans to pass an infrastructure bill, cut taxes for working families, signed paid leave into law. I codified abortion rights after Roe got overturned. Because I go to work for the common good. But enough about me. Let's talk about you. Because that's what this election is about. It's about your future. It's about your family. And Vice President Harris knows that. She too grew up in a middle-class family. She too goes to work every day, making sure families can not just get by, but get ahead. We believe in the promise of America, in those values I learned in Nebraska, and we're ready to fight for them. Because as Kamala Harris says, when we fight, we win.
There you have it. With Vice President Harris having a plethora of A-list political talent to choose from, the chemistry between Harris and Walz may have been Walz's ultimate advantage. NBC News reporting this, quote, ultimately, Harris had very strong chemistry with Walz when they met Sunday at her residence. That's according to 4 sources familiar with the selection process, playing a key role in her decision because it was clearer with him than with the other top contenders. Harris also appreciates how different Walz is from her. In in terms of the contrast he can provide, sources said. A fifth source close to the process puts it like this, quote, "Is this someone who you would want to have lunch with every week for 4 years?" But Harris's decision today goes beyond just finding a trusted partner in Walz. The governor's devastating takedown of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance as being plain old weird has gained serious traction in the party over the last few weeks. Watch.
These are weird people on the other side. They want to take books away. They want to be in your exam room. These are weird ideas. Listen to the guy. He's talking about Hannibal Lecter and shocking sharks and just whatever crazy thing pops into his mind. And I thought we just give him way too much credit. And I think one of the things is when you just ratchet down some of the the scariness or whatever and just name it what it is. I got to tell you, Jake, my observation on this is: have you ever seen the guy laugh? That seems very weird to me that an adult can go through 6.5 years of being in the public eye. If he has laughed, it's at someone, not with someone. That is weird behavior. And I don't think you call it anything else. They're awkward. And it stems from who's asking for this crazy stuff? Who's asking to raise the price of insulin? Who's asking to get rid of birth control? Who's sitting in a bar in Racine, Wisconsin saying, we need to ban Animal Farm? Nobody is.
Walz's role as a super effective messenger for Democrats is backed up by a very long resume that many hope will help the ticket appeal to a wide swath of voters. He's a veteran, he's a gun owner, a plain-spoken former high school teacher who spent years in Congress representing a rural district that went for Donald Trump in 2016. Who, as governor, passed a slew of top Democratic priorities, things like paid family leave, background checks for gun owners, and enshrining the right to an abortion in the state constitution. In the next hour, Walz and Harris will appear for the first time together as a ticket at a rally in Philadelphia. We'll bring it to you live as soon as it happens. NBC News correspondent Yamiche Alcindor is in Philadelphia for us ahead of tonight's rally. Also joining us, former U.S. Senator and co-host of MSNBC's How to Win 2024 podcast, Claire McCaskill's here with us at the table, Democratic strategist, professor at Columbia University, MSNBC political analyst Basil Smykel's here, plus chief political columnist, host of the podcast In Politic for Puck, MSNBC national affairs analyst John Heilman. I know all of you are brimming with reporting on how this came to be and what happens next. I start with you and yours, Yamiche.
Well, I wanted to start by telling you about sort of the reporting that I've been doing on how we came to the decision, to see the decision that Tim Walz is now the running mate that Vice President Harris has settled on. And it was that on Sunday, she had 3 finalists. It was Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, Josh Shapiro, the governor of the state that I'm standing in, Pennsylvania, and Tim Walz, who is, of course, the governor of Minnesota. When you start with Mark Kelly, I was told that he was someone who was seen as not supportive enough of President Biden in the weeks when people were trying to push him out of the election, trying to get him to drop out, that Mark Kelly was sort of neutral, and that was seen as not loyal enough. It was also brought up to me that he was not seen as loyal enough when it came to immigration policy, and that overall in the Biden administration, he was not seen as somebody, as a senator who was helpful in passing the legislation that they wanted to pass. Then you get to Josh Shapiro. There were conversations about whether or not his stance when it comes to the war between Israel and Hamas might anger protesters even more than they already are. This issue did not sink him, I was told, but it was a conversation around whether or not him giving a speech at the DNC as the running mate, whether or not that would really anger the base of the party. And then you get to Tim Walz. I was told that this was really a gut decision, that she's had a conversation with him, felt the chemistry, and that she ultimately settled on the fact that he is somebody that she could trust, not just as a campaign running mate, but as someone, if she is to govern with him, if there's a sort of difference between the vice president, if there's a Vice President Walz and a President Harris, that he would be someone who wouldn't be leaking to the press, he wouldn't be someone who would be complaining to staff, and whatever the decision was, that he would be able and feel comfortable being led by a woman, a Black and South Asian woman as president if they were to make it to the White House. So there was really a lot of going on here. And the thing that one source told me was, this was kind of like picking a husband. None of them are perfect, but this was someone that she felt was the best of that. And I will say, I have to note, my husband is perfect. He's an Eagles fan. But in this instance, That's what they were thinking.
I'm going to stay far away from the husband stuff. Claire McCaskill, I know you've been talking to folks as well. What do you understand about how this decision, which it is stunning that in the seconds after it was announced, you had Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Joe Manchin heaping praise upon Vice President Harris's pick of Tim Walz.
Well, I can say with a great deal of confidence, I think this did boil down to just a couple of things. Number one being, is this going to be the kind of communicator and partner that can hang out with her for a long time in a lot of stressful situations, be supportive, be strong, be persuasive? And I think everybody needs to remember, I mean, honestly, Nicole, his people called us to be on our podcast a few weeks ago, and I kind of was dismissive of it. I wasn't that familiar with Tim Walz, and I kind of thought, God, the guy's kind of thirsty. He's, popping up now and immediately when this talk of who the vice president's going to be to get on this podcast. But I got to tell you, that podcast converted me. He is so real, so genuine, speaks so plainly. He screams anti-elite. He screams, I am not an Ivy Leaguer. He screams mac and cheese and a trip to the hardware store. I can't imagine him ever walking in a room where he saw anybody as a stranger. I think the reason all those children were hugging him is because he gives you that impression that he wants to be hugged. He's a huggable guy. And I think it was that chemistry that really made the difference. And the other thing I really think made a difference was the difference in their resumes. Josh Shapiro's resume is not that different than Kamala Harris's. Prosecutor, AG, then governor, prosecutor, AG, then senator, whereas Tim Walz brings a lot more to the table. Football coach, and I might add, he was the coach of the football team, the defensive coordinator, the year they won the state championship. In that same year, he volunteered to be the faculty advisor for a group of kids that wanted to form a club that was called the Alliance Between Gay and Straight Kids. So, I mean, that's stuff that is really good stuff. And his resume was different. And I think in the long run, she saw that as something that would help the campaign more than a resume that was very similar to hers.
I love all this. I too did a deep dive today, and these are some of my favorite things that he said, John Heilman. This is him explaining the weird label, which stuck like crazy glue onto the Trump-Vance ticket. This is Governor Walz on the podcast Pod Save America.
This weird thing is not an insult. It's an observation. And people saying, well, Governor Walz came up with this. No, people are telling me this. My Republican friends are telling me this. Because when you look at it this way, who's asking for some of this stuff? Who's asking for health care to be taken away? Who's asking for birth control to be taken away? Who's asking? You picture some guys, they always do the guy's sitting in Racine, Wisconsin in the bar, what's really concerning them? I damn sure guarantee you it's not banning Animal Farm. They're talking about, God, it's too damn expensive to pay for child care. Or I'd like to do this. So I think the thing is that this spell, and you listen to him, there's nothing there. And it opens up a huge space if you can shrink the message, and then really start to focus on it. I want people to be very clear. I'm not talking about Republicans being weird. I'm talking about that dude. Just my point on this, he's making fun of Kamala Harris laughing. I got a bet out there, and he'll never collect on it. He will not laugh in public. He's incapable of it. And that's just strange.
I think people were hungry to see Trump brought down to size. I think we, and I mean the collective we, right? The pro-democracy coalition, which is the Democratic Party and all the stray cats and dogs like myself who have clung onto it in hopes of Trump not serving a second term, have in our fear of what he's saying out loud, which is certainly legitimate. It is the Project 2025 agenda. It is turning DOJ into a personal political police force. It is taking the Supreme Court's newfound total immunity for official acts and doing unthinkable things. I mean, since that decision, no one has talked about what Joe Biden or a potential President Kamala Harris would do with absolute immunity. No one. Everyone single story, not in this news organization, not at Fox News. No one's worried about what Joe Biden would do with absolute immunity. It's what Trump would do because of what Trump tried to do in his first presidency. But Walz has a totally different frame around Trump, and it's to, in his words, quote, shrink him. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and I think, you have to, anybody who wonders whether this guy is going to be a good candidate on the national stage, he's just run a campaign. I mean, he ran a campaign for this office, and I say that with admiration. Claire McCaskill just said, how many people do you think in Democratic politics Claire McCaskill would say, I've never really heard of that guy a couple weeks ago. And he has a very significant resume. We've seen it now, what his resume is, both in and out of government. Six-term member of the House, governor of Minnesota. I'm not demeaning it to say that he had not broken through. People knew who Josh Shapiro was. People knew who Andy Beshear was. People knew who a lot of these people on the short list were. He was 3 weeks ago unknown to all but maybe the top 0.1% of the political class. People had not, and he came out and did Claire McCaskill's podcast and Pod Save America. He came on this network a lot. He went on CNN. He went all over the place and was campaigned as well for the job of vice president as Kamala Harris has campaigned so far for the job of president since she's been the nominee, flawlessly, So you have to give the guy some credit there. And I will say, that you can't take this out of the context in which it exists, which is the context of a Democratic Party that's just been through hell before Vice President Harris became the nominee. All drama, more drama than you would want, any party would want in 6 election cycles. They had it in 6 weeks, right? Yeah. And you look across the aisle and you see J.D. Vance, not just as a target, but as a cautionary tale. You have been through this in politics, what it is to not pick a do no harm candidate, to pick a candidate who's a wild, bold pick. It turns out that sometimes doesn't work out so well for you. And so in this moment, when Democrats they want a no drama pick. They do not want some outside the box thinking here. We're pretty far outside the box already in terms of how Kamala Harris became the nominee. They wanted they wanted a unity candidate that all wings of the party could agree on. She met that. That's going to keep the enthusiasm high. They understand how important that is. There's not going to, any chance there's going to be any upheaval in Chicago, now gone. Love fest guaranteed. And they know they can't, in 91 days, they don't have much time, right? And to win this election, you have a very short number of news cycles. You got to keep winning news cycles, and you have to keep doing a lot of other things. But you can't have some giant screw up that consumes 10 days of your campaign, because you'll never recover from that. This guarantees that she will not have that. In addition to all of the vernacular you're talking about, where this guy does not read like the Squad. He may be progressive, but he doesn't read like far left. What he reads as is, he reads this as what Claire said, he reads as a Rotarian, and a funny Rotarian. That guy you really want to have a guy you really would be really happy to have a cheeseburger with, because he has some really funny things to say about that weirdo Donald Trump.
Funny and accurate. I also think he's
Funny things usually are accurate.
Yeah, that's true.
That's like the truth.
Oh my God, we have to get to the comedian. I think it was the Comedians for Harris call where it's not in this block, but stick a pin in that. We're going to get to funny. I want to get to his unapologetic defense of his record. This is an interview with Jake Tapper.
Do you think your record is an asset to the ticket, or would it risk fueling Trump's attacks as you being a big government liberal?
What a monster. Kids are eating and having full bellies so they can go learn, and women are making their own health care decisions. And we're a top 5 business state, and we also rank in the top 3 of happiness. Look, they're going to label whatever they're going to label. He's going to roll it out, mispronounce names, to try and make the case. The fact of the matter is, where you see the policies that Vice President Harris was a part of making, Democratic governors across the country executed those policies, and quality of life is higher, the economies are better, all of those things. Educational attainment is better. So, yeah, my kids are going to eat here, and you're going to have a chance to go to college, and you're going to have an opportunity to live where we're working on reducing carbon emissions. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have personal incomes that are higher, and you're going to have health insurance. So if that's where they want to label me, I'm more than happy to take the label.
So he had me at what a monster. I mean, this has been absent for really 8 years in the politics of Trumpism. Like, you want to turn it on me? Oh yes, what a monster I am. Feeding kids, educating them, and oh, by the way, top 5 states in the country for the economy.
There's a lot I'm going to say about this pick, but let me first talk about the Kamala Harris campaign and how smart they were and how shrewd they were in making this choice. Because Tim Walz represents so much of what, as you said, we haven't been hearing in the last several years, certainly coming from the right. And if there's something that you might miss about Joe Biden not being on the ticket, this man has it. Because as Claire talked about somebody that you might want to hug, he has said, it's important to put the glasses on. He has said the way out of all of this is through grace and optimism. What he's talking about there is empathy. That kind of empathy for all Americans, and even in the clip that you played, he's saying, look, it's not just about being far left, it's about making good policy. You can label it anything you want, but the reality is he's saying, I care about children and I care about families, thus free breakfast and lunch. He's about restorative justice and restoring rights to the formerly incarcerated. And by the way, adding on to that, being able to bring college into prisons. He's a social studies teacher, for crying out loud, at a time when folks are trying to ban books and trying to take history out of our K-12 classrooms. So all of these things, all of these components really does stand up really well against the Trump campaign, creating that split screen, creating that juxtaposition at every single turn. And another very quick point. Since 2016, but certainly since 2020, we've talked about permission structures. Donald Trump loves the permission structure, particularly when it comes to African American votes. He puts Amber Rose up there and so on and so forth. What's so great about this pick, and because of the state that Walz represents and the kind of impact he'll have, Donald Trump is running out of permission structures to add to his campaign. Campaigns are additive. He hasn't been able to do that. That's why he sounds the way he does. That's why he's flailing in the way that he is, because there is no additive effect to the J.D. Pick Vance or any other thing that he's said or done. So he's running out of those permission structures to be able to get him into communities. And what this pick does is it seals off more of those avenues and pathways. Brilliant pick, smart pick for the Harris team.
We also, I've got a growing list of things to talk about. You sat in that chair not too long ago, and I think, you talked about the Democratic Party's been there. I think everyone felt terrible. I haven't seen you feel this good and optimistic.
It's great. It's like Mr. Giggles.
I want whatever's in his cup. Yamiche, I want to come back to you on something that I think your reporting is getting at in the chemistry reporting that you've done. He makes people feel good. You watch him, and whether you sort of come to this as a lifelong liberal or as a veteran. I got an email today from a veteran who said he brought legislation to then Congressman Walz, who co-sponsored it. Obama signed it into law, really changing and improving the quality of life for veterans, especially those suffering from mental health tragedies after their service and their time. You see every pocket, not just of the Democratic Party in Joe Manchin and AOC, out with resounding support for him, but Adam Kinzinger with an equally glowing endorsement of this selection. He clearly makes people feel good. And I wonder if there's something that sort of basic about this election.
Well, that definitely factored into this decision. When they talked about executive sort of experience, they wanted to just not only focus on sort of him having been a governor, but what he did while he was governor. And I was quickly sent a list of things that the Harris campaign thought were things that added to his resume that they really liked and that appealed to the vice president specifically. So I'll just run through some of them. There's the fact that he passed the tax credit for Minnesota. There's the fact that they have paid family leave, that he codified Roe v. Wade so there's access to abortion in that state, that he ensured universal school lunch so that children will be able to have lunch throughout the state. They were pointing to those things as progressive things, but also as things that they see are really part of the democracy argument that they're making. Because one of the things that the vice president has been talking about is sort of our vision, meaning Democrats' vision of America versus Republicans' visions of America. And there are some people who said, well, is she like turning away from the idea of democracy and sort of former President Trump being a threat to democracy. And I was told by sources close to her, no, in fact, the idea of a working democracy is that women have control over their bodies, that children can be fed at their schools, that you can have paid family leave so that when a woman has a baby, she can take off and not lose her home and not be able to sort of have to survive and scramble on what she's going to do to feed that baby. So their idea is that Tim Walz is really an extension of what the democracy should be looking like, and that Donald Trump is really what the democracy should not look like, his vision for it. Nicole.
So as Yamiche is not losing any of her cool calm there, the event in Philadelphia is getting underway, and I can feel the ketchup heading to the wall when I look at the massive crowds there in Philadelphia, in a key state. We expect Governor Shapiro to speak at this event as well. We will turn into that as soon as some of those speeches get underway. Yamiche Alcindor, thank you for your reporting and for starting us off. Everyone else sticks around when we come back. Someone who worked alongside Tim Walz for nearly 20 years in both Congress and in the state of Minnesota. Friend and colleague Keith Ellison is our next guest. Plus, why young people are so completely fired up over this pick, as fired up as our friend Basil here over the selection of Governor Walz. Congressman Maxwell Frost, the youngest lawmaker in Washington, D.C., will be here on why he's all in on this new ticket. And in the next hour, we will go back live to Philadelphia for Vice President Kamala Harris's big campaign